Okay, webinar started. And, oh, we have 16 people in so far. Yeah, so everyone's starting to arrive. So thank you everyone for coming tonight. We're just waiting for people to finish arriving and then we'll start the webinar. So thank you for your patience. Well, this is great. We're seeing lots of folk. Yeah, so those of you that are just arriving, welcome, and we will get started shortly. We're just waiting for a few more people to arrive. Okay, we seem to be staying fairly stable. I think we'll wait one more minute, folks, and then we'll get ourselves going. So just hang in there. Okay, I think maybe we'll get started. All right, so Sam, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Vicki. And good evening, everybody. Thank you so kindly for joining us this evening as we together are going to understand and learn more about emotional regulation. And we begin this evening by acknowledging that we are here in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq Nation. This territory is covered by the Treaties of Peace and Friendship, which the Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqiyik Maliseet communities first signed with the British Crown in 1725. The treaties did not deal with surrender of lands and resources, but established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. This June 21st, 2021, is the national 25th anniversary of celebrating heritage, diverse cultures, and outstanding achievements of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. My name is Samantha Gascoigne, and I am so happy to be your moderator for this evening's education session. I am here on Cape Breton Island. I work as an autism support coordinator for just one of the chapters here across Autism Nova Scotia. We are recording this session this evening. Keep in mind, if you do have to step away at any point or step away or come back or leave early, we will have a posting of tonight's session posted soon on our YouTube channel with Autism Nova Scotia, so you can keep that in mind. We also have past education sessions as well posted there. We will have our autism support coordinator colleagues joining us after the session to do some question and answer. So please keep in mind during the session, if you have any comments or questions that you would like to explore, just put them in that question and answer function. We encourage you to do that as you think of them so that we can have it in queue and we can explore those at the end of the session. So we're so thankful and appreciative to introduce our presenters this evening. I'll start with Annette Muise, and she is partnered with Angeline d'Entremont. Angeline's up here first, so maybe I'll start with well, we're going back and forth here. I'll start with Angeline d'Entremont. So Angeline was born and raised in Yarmouth County, Nova Scotia. During her grade 12 years, she worked as a day camp counselor paired with a young autistic boy. This enriching experience shaped her career going forward. And in 2006, she graduated from the Nova Scotia Community College Human Services Program and began a lengthy career of serving youth and adults with various disabilities. Angeline worked in residential care for almost 15 years, then made the change to the education system, where she currently holds a position of behavioral support within an elementary school. She also worked with Autism Nova Scotia as a support coordinator for about 2 years. Through continuing education, training, and personal experience, Angeline has had the opportunity to lead several teams through this work. Throughout, Angeline's focus has been on autism, new and emerging research, and advocating for disability rights. In 2019, Angeline's daughter was diagnosed autistic, and her mission became much more personal. Thank you so kindly, Angeline, for being with us this evening. I'll introduce to you Annette Muise. Annette was born and raised in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, after completing her bachelor's degree in child and youth study. She went on to work in various child and youth settings. Some of these included childcare centers, group homes, and the Nova Scotia Early Childhood Development Intervention Services, local family resource centers, and casual Nova Scotia Community College faculty. She has chaired many committees, both at the local and provincial level. Throughout her almost 20 years of work, she has helped support many individuals and families to live their lives to the fullest. In her current role of Autism Support Coordinator of the Southwest chapter of Autism Nova Scotia, Annette works with autistics and their families living in the Tri-Counties. Well, thank you, Angeline and Annette, for being here this evening, and I'll put it over to you guys to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Sam. Welcome, everybody, and beautiful fog day here in Yarmouth. I'm not sure what it's looking like across the province, but thank you for joining us tonight. So just running through, we're going to go through our agenda here, a few things that we're going to cover this evening. First, we're going to start with what is emotional regulation, kind of defining what that means, looking at some common stressors. Then we're going to talk about some strategies to help support emotional regulation, some tools as well for emotional regulation, and then we will do a wrap-up conclusion. So, what is emotional regulation? So emotional regulation is the ability to manage your emotions and behavior in accordance with the demands of the situation. So this includes being able to resist highly emotional reactions to upsetting events, to calm yourself down when you get upset, to adjust to a change in expectations, and to handle frustration effectively. It is a set of skills that enables an individual to direct their own behavior towards a goal, despite the unpredictability of the world and our own feelings. So this is something that everybody experiences and everybody works towards on a daily basis. But for some individuals, especially those on the autism spectrum, we'll see that sometimes there are some additional challenges for them as well. So some important considerations when we talk about emotional regulation. And the very first thing is that every individual comes with their own unique personality. So how a person appears and some of the behaviors that they may show when their emotional regulation is challenged may look different. So for example, not all individuals who feel angry will have heightened emotions, show tension, redness in the face. You know, they might not necessarily make fists. You might not see that visual sign of heightened emotions. Instead, you may see little signs of emotions. Maybe they're becoming quiet or withdrawn. So recognizing that how it appears could be very different from one individual to the next. And also being aware of individual differences is important, especially if the individual is not able to communicate what they're feeling. So if you're a support person for an individual, recognizing what those emotions look like, what those behaviors may appear like when they're feeling angry, when they're feeling hungry, tired, sad, frustrated, whatever that may be. So recognizing what those emotions and what those feelings are going to look like for that individual. So we all know there's many stressors, whether it be home, community, school, workplace, for everybody. But as I said, sometimes there's additional stressors for some of the autistics that we may be working with, that we may, you know, maybe you're an individual yourself. So there's many stressors that we're faced with throughout a day, and these stressors vary from individual to individual. What is a stressor for one may definitely not be a stressor for someone else. So just looking at some common stressors, this is a small list. There's definitely many more. Some sensory ones may be certain foods, certain textures of foods, tastes of the food, getting your hair cut, going to a dentist or a doctor's appointment, certain clothing, wanting to wear the same clothing every day, or maybe the tags on the clothing, the feeling of the clothes, and maybe taking a shower. Some specific activities could be getting ready for school or work, doing homework, chores, bedtime routine. Some other family activities could be also recognizing that they may need to adjust their agenda and their interests with a family plan. So the individual may want to specifically do something such as maybe go to the park or play on their tablet, but maybe there's a plan within their family or their workplace or their school setting, and they're not able to necessarily do the exact activity that they want to do at that time, and having to adjust to that. And I just want to note that routines are very important, but consistency and predictability are key. Otherwise, routines can actually sometimes become a stressor. Some common stressors at school, community, or the workplace. So unstructured times when, you know, they may be unsure of what they're supposed to do, or they're waiting, and it could be waiting at the bus stop before or after school. It could be transitions between classes, transitions from home to work. It could be lunchtime, physical education. It could be the sensory of being out in the school or the community or the workplace, large crowds, the space. Maybe there's a lot of challenging lighting, bright lights, loud noises, things like that. And academic, or again, like I said, it could be the workplace, understanding what to do and how to do it, breaking down the tasks, writing organization. So knowing what is expected, what are your tasks, and how can you break those down into manageable pieces. Social can be a stressor for some, whether it be large groups or novel events, new events that maybe they've never attended. And also changes without proper preparation. So we all know that fire drill. So when you're sitting there and all of a sudden you're immersed in your work or whatever it may be, and that loud fire drill goes off in the school, and it's startling. And for our students with autism, it can be very anxiety provoking. So trying to prepare the individual for those events when you can. Sometimes they're pre-planned, so we're able to actually provide some support and preparation for those. And other times that fire drill is going to go off and we're not going to know, but letting them know what the procedures will be and trying to support them the best that we can prior to as well as after. And also for that student maybe showing up and having a substitute teacher. So, you know, they're expecting their teacher or their TA or EA, and all of a sudden they show up at school and there's a huge change and they might not necessarily know how to deal with that. So just an image to kind of give you an idea. So this could be a typical day in the life of a child with autism. So here we have, they start off their day with not having a great night's sleep. So maybe they had bad dreams, just had a really challenging night, went to bed late, loud noises waking them up in the morning, whatever it may be. They did not have a good night's sleep. So they get up, they go to put on their favorite clothes that they're planning to wear, and they see that they're dirty. And they may handle that okay. They may say, okay, and put on new clothes. Maybe they become upset about that. But for the most part, maybe they keep on and put on some new clothes that are suggested to them. Then they go for their favorite cereal for breakfast, and that might not be there. And as you go through the day, there could be many things that may not go in the way that they planned. Weather changes, they don't have time to play certain games, they might forget a toy or something they want to bring to school. Bus is late, maybe there's issues that happen on the bus. Again, that substitute teacher is there when they show up to school. And maybe they just feel like their learning style might be ignored, or maybe there's some social issues. And then the teacher just simply asks them to tie their shoes to get ready to go outdoors. And all of a sudden, that child gets upset. They may throw things, get angry, their voice is raised, whatever that may look like for that individual. And the teacher may not understand why asking a student to tie their shoes would cause such a reaction. The reality is it had nothing to do with the teacher asking them to tie the shoes. What happened was all of these steps through their day had been challenges that they kept trying to overcome and trying to overcome. And there is only so much that the individual could take, and that final request to tie their shoes, that was their limit. And one key piece to note here is that a neurodivergent child in the public school system will face in excess of 200 demands in a single day. And that's huge. And how many of those demands are coming at them at once? So just recognizing what these individuals are faced with on a daily basis, potentially. So looking at the physical body in regards to emotional regulation. So some autistics experience heightened reactivity. They may be more likely to experience anxiety response, such as fight, flight, freeze, or fawn to stressful events. When fear arises, a physical response follows. Maybe it's complete with racing heart, sweating palms, shallow breaths. Again, this will be different for everybody. The individual can learn to recognize the signs of panic and respond with effective strategies. So that's where we come in here tonight. So we're going to teach ways to help the individual recognize their signs of panic, upset, whatever that emotion may be, and providing some strategies to help support them through that. So for example, the individual with autism who can learn and practice deep breathing with an adult and can eventually learn to calm themselves. So with that supportive adult by their side, or supportive person, whether it be a friend, family member, it's always easier to learn new skills when you have the support of someone by your side. So I just have a little comic here. I always grew up with these ones, so this one kind of made me smile. But the little guy walks in and he says, "I don't feel so good. I think I need a hug." And that's what we want. We want the individual to be able to recognize how they're feeling, at least to some extent, and to be able to ask for what they need during that moment if we're not providing it automatically. So punishment versus support. It's very important to note that we do not punish an individual for a negative emotion or a behavior that occur as a result of being overwhelmed, especially if expectations are too high. So we hear a lot about, some of the behaviors that may occur when an individual is struggling with their emotional regulation and whether or not punishment should happen during those times. But the reality is this individual needs support. That's what they need. They do not need punishment. They need understanding and support during that time. And the reason the individual with autism may fluctuate so dramatically in their behavior is because they may be over-responsive to stress. So anything out of the ordinary can act as a stressor, and they may need extra assistance with emotional regulation under those circumstances. And again, like I mentioned in a previous slide, it may not be that event that just happened. It could be a lot of things that have happened prior to. And the biggest thing to note is what they need is their caregiver to remain calm and supportive. If we're heightened as supporters and caregivers, if we're heightened and we're emotional, then there's no way that we're going to be able to be that calm, supportive person that they need. So one of the biggest things that we can do as caregivers is to remain calm during those times and to work on our own emotional regulation as well, so that when those times come, we're able to be there and to be that support. And emotional regulation is a teachable skill. It doesn't necessarily come easy to everyone, and it is a skill that can be taught. And some autistics need support to manage their emotions and lessen their anxiety. And this skill can be taught with the help of a variety of strategies, which we will be getting into later on this evening. And practicing successful co-regulation is key. So again, making sure that we as caregivers are remaining calm as well and being that support during that time. And it may not come easy to the individual. So reminding ourselves that patience and reinforcement is what's important. So we may wonder, we're trying to teach a skill and we're not necessarily seeing that the individual maybe is understanding it or showing that they're learning the skills that we're trying to teach them. But the reality is this is a long process. It can take a long time. It's emotional regulation is a huge skill with so many different layers. So just remembering to be patient and to keep that reinforcement going. Other things to remember is that we must learn to regulate both positive and negative emotions. Sometimes we're talking a lot about, when an individual may become upset, but sometimes those heightened times when they're very excited or something exciting is happening, then sometimes those emotions need to be regulated as well. And the proactive approach works best. So trying to provide them the skills and the support prior to any serious challenges coming or any really stressful events. So trying to be proactive and giving them the skills prior to. Emotional regulation strategies can be either adaptive or maladaptive. So trying to give them those skills that are going to be beneficial for them in future years. And effective emotional regulation is not automatic for some individuals with ASD. It must be taught. So again, for some individuals with ASD, it's not going to come naturally, and they do need some support to learn these skills. And the first step is labeling the emotions. So do they know what these emotions look like and feel like? Are they able to label them? We may know, but do they actually know what it feels like to be angry, sad, thirsty, all of those things? And as with all learning, the individual needs to be at the appropriate energy and state of mind to absorb the learning. So anyone mid-meltdown is not about to learn a new skill. So again, it's that proactive approach, being there, supporting them and giving them these skills when they're wide awake, they have great energy, they're content, all their needs have been met, and they're at that perfect learning state. So that's the time to do it. So now we're going to move into some of those strategies that will support emotional regulation. So I'm going to now pass it over to Angeline.
Thanks very much, Annette. So before I get started in some of the strategies to support emotional regulation, as we mentioned in the top of the presentation, I'm coming at you with 20 years experience. I like to say on the front lines of working with autistic folks and young adults and children and pretty much anything you name it. Which is great that the first slide that I'm going to talk to you about here is the low arousal approach. And I like to say that I've always worked with the utmost dignity and respect for the persons that I'm supporting in my forefront. Especially since my daughter's diagnosis, I've spent a lot of time listening to autistic voices. Autistic adults around the world have an amazing online community, and I've shifted a lot of my philosophies and values in the work that I've done recently in the last few years. And of course, my work with Autism Nova Scotia as well has been super educational for my purposes as well. So I come to you letting you know that I always try to put my best foot forward for the people that I care for and the people that I support, whether it be at school or in their homes or in my own home. So running right into that, the first thing that I'm going to talk to you about is the low arousal approach. In essence, the low arousal approach is not just a behavior management strategy, but holistic philosophy towards caring for vulnerable people, which acknowledges that challenging behavior is not a choice. The low arousal approach emphasizes a range of strategies that focus on the reduction of stress, fear, and frustration, and seeks to prevent aggression and crisis situations. A key component here is the reflective practice of looking within ourselves and, again, making sure that we're putting our best foot forward for those that we're supporting. It seeks to understand the role of the situation by identifying triggers and using strategies and solutions to support a distressed individual. In other words, caregivers learn to spot the signs of increasing anxiety and stress and diffuse those situations before a person becomes overwhelmed or enters a meltdown. It's not about control or assigning blame, but rather looking at the individual's response through a different lens. I don't want to control anyone, and the only person that I can control is myself. So again, coming back to this, where I need to make sure that I'm calm before I can try to help somebody else calm and feel better in their own bodies. It teaches us to recognize the difference between a person who is calm, one that is escalating, one that is in crisis, and one that is in post-crisis recovery. An important note here is that that post-crisis recovery stage is in fact quite a bit longer than most people think, especially when they see, oh, well, the person is speaking to me normally and seem much calmer. There's still quite a process that needs to take place there. And the numbers that I see the most is usually like 9 minutes post-crisis, 90 minutes, sorry, to kind of return to natural state. Importance of relationship building, trust, respect, and philosophy of care. Without these 4 things, it is hard for a person to feel confident, secure, and safe. And that theme is going to come across in almost all the things that I'm going to talk to you about. It comes back to the person that you're trying to support needs to feel safe and they need to feel secure, or everybody's going to spin their wheels and nobody's going to be able to feel better. One thing that I preach in my work daily is that all behavior is communication. I've been spit on, kicked on, hair pulled, and honestly, it doesn't matter because my role is to figure out what's going on and to get to the bottom of it. And once, like Annette talked about, once those needs are met, oftentimes you can get into that learning stage of learning how to maybe have a plan to better deal with those emotions next time those things come around. Go ahead, Annette. So I like this one. It's funny that when Annette and I talked about this one the other night, she said her daughter had just had a meltdown over teeth brushing the night before, and I laugh because it's a nightly, and not often nightly anymore, but it was a nightly issue in my home as well with my daughter. But teeth brushing is a good example because there is a host of things that could be the issue with teeth brushing, and kind of like what Annette mentioned with the stair visual that she showed, where so many demands and so many things can lower our window of tolerance throughout the run of a day. But some of the issues that could confront a person, an autistic person, with teeth brushing include, it's a sensory nightmare. If you sit back and think about it, the bristles are hard often, and even the softest of the softest toothbrush, they're still hard. You can find some specialty toothbrushes on Amazon, actually, in case anybody's wondering, that are actually pretty good. But just the tactile part of the bristles, often toothpaste is super overpowering in taste, anywhere from citrus to mint and everything in between. For my daughter, I feel like the toothbrushing issue is coming back to it being a significance of upcoming transitions, where she is separated from me, her safe person. So toothbrushing in the morning is getting ready to go to school, and then toothbrushing at night is getting ready to go to bed by myself in my own bed, right? So I think for her, there's a bit of a significance of the transition, because transition is one of the things that she struggles with a lot. It's an added demand. We talked about a kid demands in the run of a day. So adding one more could be the thing that breaks the camel's back. If toothbrushing is not part of a regular routine, maybe it's the unpredictability of toothbrushing. Why is toothbrushing happening at 2 o'clock in the afternoon one day and 5 o'clock in the afternoon the next day? That could be something to keep in mind as well. And back to sensory issues, often bathroom lights are brighter, and bathrooms themselves are brighter or have weird acoustics, or there's a host of things. And I like to consider myself a bit of a detective when I'm trying to figure out some challenge behavior sometimes at work or in my home. It's often not what we see on the surface, or being asked to brush their teeth or being asked to tie their shoes before they go outside. So back to first things first, supportive environment is key and crucial to supporting a person through their emotional regulation challenges. Some of the key aspects of a supportive environment include reducing demands. And that's, especially for my daughter, is different from day to day. One day where things are going well and she's feeling pretty good, she can handle quite a few demands in the run of a day, and she may actually help out with a little bit of chores around the house. But the next day she's had, like Annette talked about, she had a substitute teacher that day, or for her, she could be constipated, or she could be haven't slept well, which is common for her as well. We tend to reduce the demands on those days and make for a much more calm and cool day for everyone involved, which of course feels better for her. Providing space. And one thing that like I mentioned off the top, I try to listen to autistic voices, and especially listen to the voices of the people that I'm supporting. And I will ask what they require for space during a particular time in their escalation. Sometimes for my daughter, she needs that deep pressure, and she needs us to be close, and she needs us to help her in that way. But sometimes she needs her space, or she doesn't feel safe to have us that close. And thankfully, we're at a stage in her regulation learning where she can tell us those things. An escape plan is huge. And on my notes here, I kind of circled the word plan. For my daughter, for the kids that I support at school, and for the adults that I've supported throughout my career, I started a shift. I start a day at school, and I start a day with my daughter with a plan. We always have a plan. We have a plan for what events may be coming up that day, or what changes may be coming up that day, or what, for my daughter, waiting is a huge issue. So what things she may have to wait for, and how long she may have to wait for them. And at school, if it's the escape plan part comes into, a lot of times, if my kids at school know that they have an out and they don't have to deal with an assembly, if they really, really don't think that they can do it, then all of a sudden they can do it. It kind of changes that perception for them sometimes, and sets up for a little bit more success. Quiet time is huge. It's huge for my daughter. And again, that's very individual and unique for some people. For some people, their quiet time might be listening to really loud music through their headphones, or it might be dead silence and quiet. For my daughter, it's laying up with her weighted blanket and watching a little bit of YouTube. It kind of allows her that chance to shut her brain off and decompress a little bit. Using exercise when anxiety levels are spiking, that's huge for everybody, neurotypical and neurodivergent alike. It's my number one self-regulation strategy is to exercise and to hit the pavement and run when I need to. We know that exercise and physical activity alters the chemicals in our brain, and it does calm us down. It physically calms us down and makes us feel better in our body. So every little bit helps and every little bit counts. Even just a 20-minute walk every day could really set up for a huge success throughout the day. Teaching interoceptive awareness and calming strategies. I'm going to slide right over that one because we have a whole slide dedicated to interoception, and I'll get deeper into it in a little bit. Providing opportunities for activities of interest. I often use some first then language, especially with my daughter, to say like, okay, first we have to brush our teeth and then I'll read you your favorite bedtime story, or just offering a little bit more incentive and reason to want to do this awful chore that I absolutely hate, like brushing my teeth. Continuing a little bit more on some of the items in a supportive environment. A predictable environment is key as well. Like I said, it kind of goes hand in hand with that plan that we talked about. For certain triggering transitions, this may require loads of reinforcement. For my daughter, she almost has a phobia of being left behind when we're leaving the house. And again, like I mentioned, she has issues with transitions a lot of times. So of course, leaving the house and things like that are big transitions for her. But her anxiety response gets heightened during those times because she feels or has this fear that we're going to leave her behind or leave without her, even though we absolutely never have in her 6 years of life. So while those transitions have gotten significantly better over the years, I still almost every time have to say, it's okay, take a breath. I'm not going to leave you behind every time we leave. And now I can say those things and she believes me when I say it, and she doesn't enter that full meltdown mode, which is, again, huge improvement from where we were when these things started. Environment includes things that interest them that can be accessed independently. This is huge in terms of the things that they need in order to calm down, right? My daughter has a full tool kit of fidgets and her weighted blanket and her particular fuzzy squishy, the things that we know that she needs to feel good and to decompress from those meltdown situations. In a nutshell, everyone needs to have a safe environment, and it's huge. A safe space to express themselves, a safe space to be themselves, a safe space to cry, to stim, to laugh, or to feel their feelings, big and small. I try to do that for the kids I support at school. I try to do that for my own child, to help contribute and sometimes even be that supportive environment for the person that I'm supporting. And oftentimes that's when the real work begins. Emotional regulation can impact social skills. I see this a lot at school, unfortunately, of course, working with a young population that is very swayed one way or another, and kids have a hard time understanding sometimes the things, understanding the things that they see sometimes, and if they don't have that open dialogue with somebody to understand and to learn about these things a little better, social skills sometimes get impacted. Social communication is a challenge because they may have difficulty recognizing how emotions feel and expressing, labeling them. And I mentioned that a few times, and we'll get a little bit more into that as well. It's unrealistic to expect the individual to communicate their emotions if they do not know how to label them in the first place. We come to understand that we need to be able to communicate what we're feeling. But again, that's impossible to do if we don't know what we're feeling. If I don't know what angry feels like, I can't tell you I'm feeling angry. And then that behavior, challenging behavior often comes out in its place. Even if you're on the go and pressed for time, you can still practice labeling emotions. And this is something that I worked with my daughter for a long time. Like I said, she got her diagnosis a little bit later, but we started seeing that she was having some issues with certain things, especially around her emotions. Everything was angry for her all the time. So we started working on labeling these emotions before we even really had her diagnosis. And is something that we worked in our daily practice, and just, watching TV, watching a movie and saying, hey, that character seems a little frustrated, or that character seems a little bit jealous. And why do we think that person feels jealous in the show or in the movie, or even out and about in public? Or, oh, that child seems very, very happy to be getting a lollipop today. How does it feel for you when you're happy? And how do you express when you're happy? And what do I see when you're happy? It's really easy to just get that conversation going, especially when your child or the person you're supporting is in a calm, regulated state and is able to carry on that conversation, thinking about past experiences or what ifs, which is the next point. Give the child hypothetical situations. Moving on to interoception. Interoception, go ahead. Interoception is very important to me in a lot of ways. Like I said, I've been doing this work for 20 years, and this is the first program, and I don't really even like using the word program. I've had a lot of success with the folks that I've worked interoception with on. And just in that terms of understanding and feeling a feeling and knowing what that feeling means, and then knowing what to do about that feeling, and if I have to do something about that feeling, because we don't always have to, and then how to get ourselves feeling the way we want to feel sometimes. And of course, that's not always possible, but this is a super great curriculum that was developed by an American occupational therapist named Kelly Maller. The big picture of interoception is around awareness of self. The sense of self enables us to reflect upon ourselves, allowing for introspection and thus assessment of our behavior in relation to the world and others around us. So not only are our interoception and self-awareness skills important to our ability to control our body, they also form a social foundation for how we behave and interact with our surroundings. Awareness of these body sensations enables us to experience essential emotions such as hunger, fullness, thirst, pain, body temperature, need for the bathroom, sexual arousal, relaxation, anxiety, sadness, frustration, and safety, and almost anything else. What's great about the interoception curriculum as it's written, it's very trauma-informed and super sensitive to all learning abilities, and anywhere the person that you're trying to support through learning the skill, you can meet them there. And it's fun. It's fun for the participant, which is something that a lot of the programs. So the way it kind of rolls around is it's a long program and you pass through many different modules or lessons. And then the first one, for example, you start with hands. And you go through a series of type of experiments, they're called, I guess, or experiences, where, for example, for one, you would put hand lotion on a person's hand and you would ask the person to describe how that feels. It could be slimy, it could be icky, it could be a completely made up word, but you use the person's vocabulary where it is, of course, and that's what you write down. Okay, so one feeling is icky. And as you go through the program and you pass through all the different body parts, both internal and external, and you end up with this huge vocabulary of words and feelings that the person experiences themselves individually, uniquely, right? And once you've built that all together, you can put it all together in a sort of mathematical formula in the end and determine what those feelings mean. So if I have a grumbling stomach and I feel a little bit dizzy, I might be hungry and then I need to eat to feel better. Or if I have butterflies in my stomach and my palms are sweaty and my feet are jiggly, then maybe I'm a little bit anxious and I should practice some deep breathing or do something else to make my body feel a little bit better in this particular situation. We have at the end of our presentation, the website for Kelly Maller's website, and I encourage you to go have a look at it. It's a super, super good resource. And that's just a few more things to consider on interoception here at the end. What would happen if your interoception system was not functioning as it should? What if you were unable to feel what was happening in your body? Sometimes sometimes an autistic person will overfeel or underfeel what's going on. My daughter, for example, has a super high tolerance for pain, but can't stand getting her hair brushed. Or what if your internal sensations were so overwhelming that you could not figure out what they mean? How can we expect the individual to be successful at regulating their emotions if they don't recognize what they're feeling to begin with? Of course, it's kind of key. We have a cute example coming up next. One day, your young daughter doesn't want to wear her new snow boots. You insist, since sidewalks are icy and you're concerned for her safety. However, your daughter depends on being able to wear the same sneakers every day. The thought of not wearing them triggers feelings of instability and anger for her. However, she doesn't have the skills she needs to explain why she's upset and discuss the issue with you. She struggles to recognize her own feelings, much less articulate them calmly. As a result, she acts rashly, hurling her snow boots at you. After that, the focus of your conversation shifts to her inappropriate coping behavior. Her intended message, "I just want to feel safe and wear my sneakers," gets lost in translation. And that point comes back to the things that we've mentioned throughout. The extra demands, not understanding where the behavior is coming from and what's underlying beneath that behavior. It's key. For my daughter, for example, will not wear anything other than a dress. So we've compromised to the point where she can wear leggings underneath her dress. And then just because, we have to be appropriate, especially when we're at school. And through winter and through those things, we have to come up with these compromises and with these plans with her, so that she can be okay in her clothing and what she's going to school with in that day, to make sure that she can cope with whatever's going on, because there's a lot of things in her clothing that have an impact on her day. And of course, those things extend beyond just clothing for a lot of kids. Past experiences. We learn to put our current emotions in context with our past experiences. This creates expectations about future events. These expectations guide our behavior and emotional responses when we encounter similar situation in the future. I wanted to make a little note here to consider trauma from being atypical living in a typical world. In some of the online communities that I mentioned off the top, online autistic communities, there's a lot of talk, and there's a lot of research now being done in terms of the trauma that an autistic person will experience by simply just being atypical living in a typical focused world. Kelly Maller, that developed the interception curriculum, actually did a wonderful series on autistic trauma and what that could mean. She further breaks it down in the different types of trauma that an autistic person may experience, including sensory trauma, social trauma, compliance trauma, neurological trauma, and interception challenges, of course, information processing differences, and medical trauma by being misunderstood from the medical profession, which unfortunately is common for many adults. So just something to keep in mind, especially when working on things like self-regulation and emotional regulation, and how we approach that with somebody. So another important key strategy, and this is just one of many visuals that you can do when you try to implement this type of strategy for helping somebody learn the principles of emotional regulation. In this little visual, you see one column that says emotional level, and then another column that says, "I feel this way when." So this kind of quantifies feelings and emotions for a person, creates a visual aid that depicts the different levels of emotions that an individual may feel, because angry and really angry and furious are not all the same feeling. And that's a very abstract concept to try to understand, especially when trying to teach this stuff. You can also add a column about how they feel during each emotional level. So I'm feeling upset, I can't figure out an answer on my homework. And when I feel upset, I feel like my fists are tight and I don't quite know what to say, or I can't quite get the words out. We can provide scenarios and ask how they would feel and try to get those things out on paper. Or you could do this I tend to do this over time, especially when I do a lot of observation in my work, and I kind of make notes of these things and work on it with the person during a calm time. A great tool to use to try to intervene prior to a crisis are these little charts, a reminder to individuals of what they identified as signs of their emotional level. Oftentimes in my work, when I'm trying to intervene with one of these charts, and I say, well, we wrote here the other day when you were nice and calm that when you're feeling upset, your hands may be fisted or your face might be turning red, and this is what I see right now. Oftentimes I get met, well, no, I'm calm, I'm perfectly calm. So if I can refer back to what we talked about during a calm time, sometimes I have a little bit more give from the person that I'm trying to support. And of course, emotions don't always feel the same way, nor are they always experienced at the same degree. In order to know what to do about an emotion, deciphering if the emotion is actually an issue and if something needs to be done about it, it's important to be able to quantify that emotion. Sometimes it's sufficient to just acknowledge the feeling and sit with it. Kind of along these lines, the next slide, covers the 5-point scale. I've used a variation of this, especially with my older kids and probably adults, as a thermometer with a scale of 0 to 10. And here we can not only talk about emotion, but also about energy and the energy level we need for a certain activity, right? Because we need a higher, more, maybe a little bit more of an anxiety response to run a marathon is an appropriate energy level to have for that situation. But feeling like you're ready to run a marathon in a grade 6 classroom is probably not the appropriate energy for that situation. So again, there's obviously a lot of layers, like Annette said, to this learning of emotional regulation and figuring out which energies and which emotions are appropriate for which context. The next slide comes back a little bit to that low arousal approach, the energy that we are giving off during a crisis situation as caregivers and support persons. We're not that safe person if at that 5 at the high point of a crisis situation, we are trying to punish the behavior or we're trying to scold the behavior that we're seeing as a result of that communication not being able to come through calmly to begin with. The bottom, if you can see the bottom curve underneath the higher curve, that's staff or caregiver response. So naturally, of course, our stress response goes up a little bit as well during these high stress situations, but it's super important to take mental note and to do a self-check all throughout the crisis process and make sure that we are keeping ourselves in check. Another phrase that I use for that at work all the time is that an escalated adult cannot de-escalate a child, an escalated child especially. It's impossible. It doesn't work. So if I have to say that, I usually, and there's no shame as a staff person, if we have any staff people here, to swap out if you have to or if you can, and it's more learning for the person who's experiencing the crisis situation to say, I need a moment to self-regulate right now before we can continue on this and do so safely as the best you can. I think it's one of the last strategies that I'm going to be talking to you about, other than a little quick recap at the end, is the zones of regulation. This is another program that's widely used in the education system, especially around the world, actually. It's created by a large company called socialthinking.com, which we have at the end as well. The zones of regulation is an approach to teach regulation by categorizing all the different ways we feel and states of alertness we experience into 4 concrete colored zones. So what I do at school often is when I start working with a child, I start with the interception program where we can identify what those feelings feel like. And then once we've mastered that, we move on to the zones of regulation where we can kind of categorize those feelings and more concretely build a toolbox in terms of what we need to do when we're feeling happy. Okay, we're in the green zone. So what should I do to make sure that I stay in the green zone if that's what's appropriate for the current context? Or if I'm in the red zone and I'm out of control, again, what that looks like and what is in my toolbox to return to the green or whatever context I need or whatever situation I need. Individuals build skills in emotional and sensory regulation, executive functioning, and social cognition. The framework is designed to help move individuals toward more independent regulation while also honoring and respecting each student and their unique self. Again, throughout this process, no matter which strategy you choose to try, it's a very unique and individual toolkit and process for everybody. One of the advantages of the zones of regulation that I found, like I said, it's used worldwide. So there are a lot of resources online, some free, some that some other folks have kind of adapted and used. And as well, the company Social Thinking updates the visuals quite often. They've just updated the visuals of the emotions themselves, which I was grateful for because I didn't particularly care for these, but now they look much better. And some of the last few things that I'm going to talk about, and one that is big for me, if you want to go to the next slide, Annette, are appropriate expectations. And that's something that I especially need to hold in check when I'm working with my own daughter. I have high expectations for my kids, and again, understanding when those days that I need to reduce demands and what I need to do and what I need to keep in check to ensure her success. and one important point too is that I'm the adult and she's the 6-year-old with executive dysfunction that I need to support through life. So if I want her to learn these skills, at this point, I need to keep her calm first so that she can learn. So when expectations are too high, negative emotions and behavior are very likely. If a person consistently displays negative emotions or behavior, you likely need to lower expectations. And again, something I do a lot is think of how I would feel. If I'm constantly failing at something, it's hard to keep trying, right? So if the expectations are too high and there's failure often, it's hard to keep motivated to keep trying. Temporarily lowering expectations to a previous level of success will increase emotional regulation and build positive experiences and relationships. We're always trying to build on the positive at school and build on the successes that we have and build from there. This work doesn't happen overnight. It takes years and a lot of trial and error and ebbs and flows. I know that Christmas is a huge trigger for my daughter, so we basically have no expectations or demands the entire month of December, and I know that that's what we need to do to ensure her success. We draw on positive success experiences to help us cope with stressful situations. I often bring her back to the positive and the things that she has accomplished. She has a tendency to catastrophize when she gets especially even a little bit emotionally dysregulated, and reminding her of those successes seems to help her quite a bit. Flexibility is key to supporting individuals with ASD, and it comes back to what I've been saying. I have an older daughter who's neurotypical, and when my youngest daughter got diagnosed, we've had to basically change our parenting style completely. And again, we are the adults with the typically functioning brain and the typically functioning executive functioning skills. So we need to be flexible for her to learn those skills. Some of the last few tips and strategies that I'm going to try to go over a little bit quickly here. Assess the demands for the individual when planning the schedule. We talked about plans, and I talked about how important those plans are, but most importantly, I make those plans with the person I'm supporting. It's not helpful if I just lay out the plan and it's just another demand on that person's day. I do my best to make sure to advocate for the persons I'm supporting and to encourage for them to self-advocate as well. Incorporate a balance of low stress, high pleasure activities for the individual. Again, kind of talking that first then language and keeping that in mind. Because a person who experiences executive dysfunction, a task requiring high commitment from the executive functions with no dopamine reward will often be seen as completely unbearable. Keeping that in mind when we're asking them to write their name for the 400th time in the day. Includes stress, use visuals and time prompts. For my daughter, that's something that at this point we can do verbally, but again, from using them so much and using visual timers a lot, for her to now she understands what 10 minutes looks like, but it took a lot of practice to get her there. And just knowing that lowers her anxiety response quite a bit. Removing or decreasing disliked activities, allowing modified participation or less time required, provide incentive for cooperation and participation. For me, that's huge, especially in a school situation. My daughter doesn't particularly like to color. Fine motor movement is often a challenge for folks on the spectrum sometimes. What essential life skill is she learning by having to color at the end of every task? I don't see one that's very important. So we just kind of get rid of that. And and her knowing that she doesn't have to do that task that she finds difficult lowers her anxiety as well. Remove, decrease difficult activities, kind of goes back to what I just said. Operate on their time, allow plenty of time to avoid rushing, allowing a lot of transition time, allowing some processing time, especially if you're only using verbal language. Keep in mind that the process of teaching regulation is a lifelong process. Our needs change as well as the effective tools. This is also not a linear process. There will be gains, there will be setbacks. And lastly, for me, creating an emotional toolkit is really the end goal for any of this work that we're doing. And when I'm starting that with a student or with a person that I'm supporting, I always start with sharing my own. I've mentioned that, physical activity is something that I do to make sure that I stay emotionally regulated. But I have a whole list of things that I share as my emotional toolkit before we build one together. And what an emotional toolkit is basically just a diary of the specific strategies and things that work for the person that you're working with. To make them even more helpful, you could link them to, so when I'm feeling angry, I need to go for a walk, or when I'm feeling sad, I need a hug. Again, the tool is individual, and it's individual to the emotion as well. This facilitates regulation, increasing repertoire of emotions understood, beginning of course with the basic and then adding more complex. Utilize everyday experiences to teach, which I talked about, like when you're watching TV or when you're going through maybe a little bit of a disagreement, using some comforting and some safe language. Understand how frustrating it is when, we have to brush our teeth even though we don't want to. It's disappointing when we don't get to go to our grandmother's, and that was the plan, and we have to change our plan. Making sure that we use language that is validating, I guess, is the end goal there. And I think that's it from me, Annette.
Okay. So just continuing on with that emotional toolkit. So looking at some physical activity tools that we may want to use. So offering a quick release of emotional energy. Maybe we're noticing that they have some energy that they need to get rid of. So whether that be, like Angeline said, exercise, getting out, walking, running, maybe using the trampoline, going to the playground on the swing, whatever that may look like for that individual. Maybe engaging in some sports, basketball, golf, dance, whatever may be of interest. Maybe it's creative destruction, and I really like this one. So maybe they just want to destroy something. So let's give them something that they can destroy that's creative and constructive. So maybe shredding paper that might be needed to burn in the fireplace at home, or maybe it's putting papers through the shredder, whether it be at school or in the workplace. Just that motion of putting the paper in and seeing the pieces come out, like, or crushing cans and putting them in the recycling bin. So things like that. And constructive service. So giving them something to do, sometimes giving them those chores or activities that they feel helpful and part of the group or part of whatever environment they're in. So returning books to the library, helping with household or classroom chores, maybe bringing something to the principal's office, whatever that may be. And then looking at some relaxation tools. So on the opposite end, instead of getting all that energy out, maybe it's that quiet time that they may need. So what that may look like for them may be some relaxation things. It may be music playing, whether, again, like Angeline said, maybe it'll be quiet, maybe it'll be loud. It's whatever that individual prefers. So solitude, maybe just going off by themselves or with a caregiver or a support person, whether that might be a sibling or a friend, whatever it is to that person. So just going off and having some time to themselves. Maybe massage, maybe swing, sleep, yoga, deep breathing, whatever it may be. And also social tools. So maybe it's having that extra time with a family member or a friend or a sibling. Maybe it's expressing themselves, whether it be through music, art, poetry, journaling. Maybe they love the guitar, or maybe they love drawing. And so maybe it's, just being able to do that. And being able to seek advice. So maybe it's them coming to their support provider, asking for advice on what they should do. And also we as caregivers, we need to also sometimes reach out to other people. We won't know, we won't have all the answers. We won't know what to do in every situation. So that goes both ways. Maybe time with a pet. Maybe it's their pet dog, cat, snake, whatever that may be. That might be their way to calm. Just being with them, holding them, patting them, walking them, whatever that may be. And as we mentioned before, maybe it's affection. Maybe they want that hug or that snuggle, or, or maybe they don't. Maybe, as Angeline mentioned, there's times where they just need their space, and that's what they need as well. So just recognizing what they may need in those times. If they can't, maybe they can tell us, maybe they can't. So having those tools so that we'll know what they need in those times. And some sensory tools. We talked about sensory sometimes being one of the challenges when it comes to emotional regulation. So maybe they want earplugs or headphones when there's loud noises around and a lot going on around them. Maybe it's some lighting, fiber optic, lava lamp, those kind of things that they can kind of just zone into and watch for a little bit and kind of forget all the challenges that maybe they're faced with, just being able to step away from the situation for a minute and just allow their body to calm and start to regulate. Maybe it's fidgets. So carrying around that bag of fidgets, so no matter where they are, they have those tools to kind of help them get through that situation. And again, as mentioned, maybe weighted pads, blankets, or maybe it's some of that massage, deep pressure massage. So, and when the individual learns to regulate their emotions, it has a positive effect on their confidence. And this is really our end goal. This is what we want. We want these individuals, we want them to feel confident. We want them to feel successful and happy. And if we can help support them during all of this learning to help them have the skills to be able to regulate their emotions a little bit better, then that is the goal. So in conclusion, this is a learning process for both the individual and the caregiver, as we said. It is going to be a learning process that's ongoing. Life changes, situations change through every age, you know, whether it be toddler to preschool to, you know, your school age into adolescence, adulthood. Those needs are going to change, and the learning process is going to change through those times as well as just different situations. So it's about understanding and support. Again, that's what it comes down to, just recognizing that that's what they need. They need to feel understood and supported in those moments, and that's the key. There are many tools and strategies and use what works for the individual. So we've given you a variety of them. Some may work, some may not. Some may be modified. So it's deciding what works for that individual. And I really like what Angeline mentioned is including the individual in that plan. So not trying to figure out exactly what you think will work best, but talking to the individual, figuring out what their needs are and maybe what they would like to see as some strategies to maybe start using. And maybe you'll try them and they won't work and you'll have to move on to something else, but just including them in that process. And life is hard, but with the right tools, we can make it easier. So there's going to be challenges, but the thing is, if we have those tools, when those challenges arise, we can feel more confident to make it through. And again, as we mentioned before, recognizing successes no matter how big or small. So again, it's in those moments where maybe the individual is feeling very defeated based on the experience that they just had. They may be very upset. They may be just feeling really down about some things that might have just gone on or transpired, but recognizing their successes. So yes, you may have thrown the chair across the room, but you know what? I realized that, you hesitated. You almost stopped yourself, but something didn't allow you to. But I saw there was a moment, even a small moment, where you tried. And you know what? We're going to just keep trying and just recognizing that. And just to mention too, that obviously emotional regulation is a huge topic. So just if there's any more information you may want on this topic or any other topic, just to let you know, there will be a survey at the end of this session. So if there's any information, maybe there's something we talked about today that you'd like more information on or more discussion on, or maybe there's a different topic altogether. But that survey will be coming out after the session. So make sure you fill it out and just look at these couple pictures. And at the bottom, you got this, you can do it. And in the top, believe in yourself. You're not that little kitty, you're that tiger and you can take on anything. So thank you.
Thank you, Annette and Angeline. And I did like those two photos, Annette, on that last slide. That was giving me a lot of confidence as a caregiver. I want to say personally how much I appreciated that presentation. That was the quickest hour and 10 minutes of my life. I was just really engaged in it. And Angeline said something about, I'll try to make this quick. And I thought, why? We just got started. But then I looked and it was almost 8 o'clock. It was just very, very thorough and very helpful for me. And I'm sure the whole audience. I wanted to say, Annette, the slide about a day in the life, I really, really like that. So it was sort of like a steps analogy of the day. So having unplanned and unpredictable stressors. I mean, 200 demands in a day. That's a lot of demands. I'm also a mom of an autistic boy, and I think back to the many a days I picked him up after school, and the teacher, TA, kind of bringing him to the car and saying, "Oh, he had a great day," and me kind of seeing that something wasn't quite right, but being told he had a great day because his day was quite smooth. And to me, feeling out of nowhere, just because I asked him to put his seatbelt on, we're at the beginning and into the middle of a meltdown, and me having to take a breath and say, what happened? So kind of reflecting now of how many demands were really leveling up there, that now he's sort of in his safe space with me and can just let it go. And Angeline really understanding those emotional regulation strategies and tips. And I found it really insightful when you talked about the post-crisis timing. I wouldn't have really considered that length of time. So continuing to really support the individual with less demands, providing space, if the individual can articulate, and asking them, how can I support you? How can I help you feel safe and supported? Angeline, can you remind us, did you say 19 minutes?
90, an hour and a half, sorry.
Oh, 90.
Yeah.
Wow. Yep. Interesting. I thought 19 was a lot of minutes, but you're saying 90. Okay.
Yeah. Some of the education that I did not too long ago, actually, and I can share the website with Annette as well. I just didn't think of it. I did a webinar just almost like this with a lady named Susan Issa. And she's an autistic advocate from the UK, and she did an entire little webinar, about an hour. The webinar itself is about an hour long, on specifically meltdown and the stages of a meltdown and how to best intervene in each stage. And she talked a lot about that 90-minute post, and like you say, continuing to support in that time frame is super important.
Mm-hmm. Because I think we do often see, okay, they're kind of they're kind of being more comfortable. They might have moved out of the space where, if they needed space, maybe they moved out of that, and then we sort of jump in and want to get right back to those demands. So really staying calm, letting them feel it out for that 90-minute window. Okay, very good. Well, thank you. It looks like I jumped into the first question and answer, and we're going to move forward with that mode. We have colleagues of mine, support coordinators across Autism Nova Scotia. We have 3 here this evening. Leah Poirier from Arturo Tractor. I'll let you introduce yourself, Leah, and you can read aloud the first question. Angeline and Annette, you guys can kind of tag team with the answers, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam, for the introduction. I agree and concur with Sam. An excellent presentation tonight, ladies. I wrote down that all behavior is communication. That's a key thing that I always think in my role, both as support coordinator in the Truro region and also as, again, another autism parent to a teenage boy with autism. So question number 1 I have for you is related to support. How do I support, or how do I set reasonable expectations when emotional regulation is causing kind of significant damage or harm?
I'll start. I don't have all the answers by any means, but for me, I guess safety is huge, of course. So it depends a lot on the situation, but ultimately everybody has to remain safe. And having said that, I don't feel that there's any safety in restraint either. But on the few occasions, I'll use personal experience, on the few occasions where safety had become an issue, separation as much as we had to during those moments. But until something gets unsafe, there's a lot that we can do. And again, it is that detective work during calm moments where we need to talk about what the person needs in those moments. And again, now at this stage with my daughter, after having done a lot of those calm conversations with her, when she's escalating, I can say, what do you need? And she knows that I'm going to provide for her whatever she can communicate with me that she needs in that time. So we don't often get to those unsafe points anymore. I can't tell you the last time we got there was actually. So that's, of course, I've learned easier to do when you're dealing with your own child in your own home and you have control over a lot in the environment. It's a big challenge for me to do that for my students at school, and it's been a big challenge for me to do that throughout my career when there's a lot more in the environment and things that you can't really nip in the bud before it gets too big. Annette, anything to add there?
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. And the only thing, like you said, with environment. So, if there's, when you start to see them escalating and you see these behaviors starting, is there a safer environment that you can move them to? So if it's happening right in the classroom, or if it's happening in a certain room of the house or near the road, trying to just, move that individual to another room where you can focus more on supporting them and there's not so many dangers around. So you're more able to focus on them instead of the environment. So
that's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jill Cormier from our Halifax Central office. Do we have another question?
We do. Great presentation, ladies. I'm going to call you guys the A-team, the amazing A-team. Great job. So I did have a question. So what if I have tried all of these strategies? So like the first Dan and breaking those steps down using routine, and it's still not working. What would you suggest?
Go ahead, Annette.
Okay, I'll start with this one. So like we mentioned in the presentation, it doesn't mean that they're not working. You may not see, again, it's getting back to that expectation. So you may not be getting what you wanted, or you may not be seeing the gains that you expected to see after, teaching certain lessons or teaching certain skills. But the reality is we don't know how much learning is actually happening and how successful we actually are being. So we may not necessarily see them doing what we expected them to do, but it doesn't mean that they haven't learned some of the skills and they're not processing some of those skills and maybe even utilizing them to some extent. And it just may be us, again, recognizing those small successes, those small steps. So, and just keep trying. And again, there's more strategies. There's a way to modify even the strategies that we showed you tonight. Some of those charts, maybe it's using it in a different way, trying to work with the child or individual's interest. If they're interested in what you're doing, instead of just smiley faces, maybe it's, I don't know, SpongeBob faces or whatever that may be, right? So just trying to use their interest sometimes too will kind of help as well.
I think the key point there too is that this, like we said, it's a lifelong process. Again, if looking back, maybe I could, on a particularly bad day, I'd say, oh, well, we haven't made any progress. But to look back now to when we first started working on emotional regulation with my daughter, like I said, it was before even her diagnosis. Like I said just earlier, we haven't reached a full unsafe meltdown in a very long time. And there was a time where sadly those were quite frequent. So yeah, like I say, on a particular bad day, I can say, well, we're not making any progress and this isn't getting any better. But to really reflect on it. Yeah, the progress is huge. And again, it changes across the lifespan. And what she needs now, being a student in school full time, is different than what she needed those years ago as well. It's constantly adapting and changing in our supports.
I would assume too, as they grow, I mean,
Yep.
yeah, what they're going to respond to as a young child, like you say, it's going to be adapted as they grow and change, and their stressors change.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Rachel Wynot from South Shore chapter. She's our other coordinator here this evening. Do we have another question to read aloud, Rachel?
I do have a question that came up in the chat in the question and answer. The question is, are there cases that emotional regulation strategies would not work? Is medication a solution?
Medication to me, and this is a very much a matter of opinion, I guess. There are many opinions across the autistic community on medication, but for us and our family, it's just another tool. Medication in itself was not enough, and emotional regulation learning at the time was not enough as well, to curb that unsafe behavior in some ways. Maybe as she goes across her lifespan, and becomes more familiar with these strategies and these tools, and they become second nature to her, maybe we won't need medication anymore. But for right now, that's what our family needs. And I think it's a very, like the strategies, a very unique and individual thing, in terms of if a family needs medication or if a person needs medication to get this learning done.
Yeah. Again, it's having that conversation with whatever professionals maybe you're working with, whether it be doctor or mental health or whatever it may be, and saying, you know, this is what we're seeing, this is what we've tried. Do we need to maybe look at something else? So having those open, honest discussions.
Thank you, and thank you both for the presentation. It was great.
Great. I'll circle back to Leah and ask if you have a question there.
I do have one additional question. This is a question about something similar that Sam brought up, the fact that a child has a meltdown once they're home and in that safe space. So its question is, though, how do I help other people, whether they be teachers or coworkers or extended family, perhaps, understand the emotional regulation experiences of someone with autism when they themselves perhaps don't see those things firsthand?
You're gonna make me go first again, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I'm gonna let you take this one.
I see it on your face. To me, and my family and friends and colleagues would tell you that my number one tool in terms of that is education, and I try to help educate. I, much like when I'm supporting a person on the spectrum or I'm supporting a person through a meltdown, I try to know my audience, and I try to build a relationship and a rapport with the person that I'm trying to educate. I like to think that a lot of the misconceptions and stigma that we still face in our world today is due to a lack of education and a lack of knowledge on a lot of topics, and try to do my part by adding to that education piece as much as I can. Unfortunately, the audience is not always very receptive. Again, knowing your audience, trying to lay things out in terms that they will understand. There's a metaphor for almost everything, and let's start from there. I guess that's my approach, and it pretty much does the same in her every day, and she does a wonderful job at it.
Excellent answer to that question. I was really getting geared up to how you were going to tackle that, Angeline, and yeah. Jill, do we have another question?
Oh, I think this is the last one, unless there's more coming in. So how can we help someone regulate their emotions when they're going for their COVID-19 vaccine or if they're going for testing?
Annette, go ahead.
I was going to say, I can hop in here if you want. So again, it goes back to some of those strategies. So what works for that individual? So we talked about maybe like, you know, social stories where, you know, we can talk about, okay, so these are the steps. This is what's going to happen. It's that plan of what are the steps when you arrive, what is it going to look like? What is it going to sound like? What are the things that are going to happen? What are you maybe going to bring with you? You know, we can talk about, you know, because it might be a stuffed animal, or it might be their headphones with their favorite music, or so what will we bring? And, you know, maybe it's, you know, so, you know, after your song is over on your headphones, then, you know, it will be over. We can talk about, you know, the feeling of the needle going in. And talking about what happens after. So, you know, in that 15-minute period, what's that going to look like? Are they able to wait in the waiting room? Would they rather be in their car? Or what's that going to look like? So again, it's just letting them know, preparing them for the steps, preparing them for the sensory that they're going to experience, the lights, the sounds, the feelings, all of those sorts of things. So just preparing them the best you can, being a support person as well during that. They're allowed to have someone with them, be there and walking them through that. So just allowing them to feel as safe as they can. And there's also ways to, you know, depending on your location, there might be kind of drive-through, so they don't even have to get out of their vehicle, and that may be a safer place for them. So, and some of them were even coming to communities. I'm not sure if that was, I think, more for the testing, but, you know, there's ways to reach out and see how can that individual be supported in that setting. What, you know, you can request certain things, like, can it be in a quieter spot? Maybe there's a certain time of day that there'll be less people there, or things like that. So again, it's just that preparation piece and that support. I'm not sure if you have anything more, Angeline, but.
Yeah, that nails it for sure. Kind of like in the last question, people fear what they don't understand and what they don't know, right? So that education piece is huge as well. Understanding why you're going for a COVID vaccine and what that means and what that looks like. At work, at school, I work very closely with my resource teacher. And when we have a specific event or a specific change, like COVID vaccine or COVID testing, and really you can lump it all in as the same thing, just another change, another big event of some kind. We just planned for water day at school the other day. And, you know, the rest of the staff at school kind of, they chuckle at us sometimes because we always plan for the worst, but hope for the best. So we always have a plan for any worst case scenario there could be. And most of the time we don't need the plan, but we have the plan and the student that we're supporting has the plan. So again, like I said, it kind of just is that added setup for success.
And I would think recognizing their emotions as well, right? So you
Absolutely.
feel scared, you feel nervous. A family shared with me a tip of using a obviously empty syringe needle and actually practicing it on.
Yep.
So those visual stories are good and auditory stories, but actually having what it looks like and bringing it to the arm, recognizing those feelings, having those rewards after the fact to help them get through that fear, and then having the reward. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome question. I'm just going to read this aloud. It says, I missed the first part of this webinar. Is this going to be done again? So this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to our Autism Nova Scotia YouTube channel, where you can find past presentations as well. Any other questions, Jill? Or who's next? I forgot who asked the last one.
I don't think there is any more.
No? Okay. Okay.
Oh, sorry, Sam. There is one more question that's on the Q&A. Did everybody see? I can read it.
Thank you, Vicki.
There's a nonverbal student who's been under the weather most of the year with thrush. All he wants to do is be under a weighted blanket. Has many tics, many behaviors. Are there any suggestions?
Well, my It's hard to, of course, comment on specific cases and specific students. But my first inclination here says that, you know, you kind of answered your own question with that he's been under the weather most of the year with thrush. That to anybody can be super bothersome, of course, and add autism in there as well, and it can be a sensory nightmare like we talked about earlier. Again, for me, it's to lower demands to a point of success. So if we can get and what are the goals? Is the goal to have him at his desk learning like the rest of the students in his class? Is the goal to have him complete one worksheet? So if the goal is to complete one worksheet, let's get one done, or let's get our name done, or the first letter of our name done, and celebrate that success and build on those successes. That's where I would start. I don't know about you, Annette.
No, I agree. It's just meeting them where they're at, and again, just, you know, getting those small successes and building from there. I agree. Yeah.
And what about learning under that weighted blanket if their goal is to finish that? So adapting to that student, if they're comfortable like that, I would imagine that student would be quite uncomfortable, like you say, Angeline, like it's hard to help them in that discomfort of the condition they're in. So if they are comfortable under the weighted blanket, kind of lowering those demands and, you know, bringing some of those goals to where he or she is comfortable.
My daughter did online school under a weighted blanket on the lazy boy with an ice pack on her stomach and a heat pack on her neck. We were building for success.
That's how I want to work. She's got some good ideas. Oh dear. Any other questions we may have missed? Coordinators? No? Okay. Well, that was a beautiful evening of information and insight. I'd like to note that support coordinators in your region are here for you. Should you have any follow-up questions that you want to reach out to the Autism Support Coordinator in your area, you can see on the slide, we have names and emails of all the support coordinators across every chapter. And there was some website links there as well that were mentioned during the presentation. So really good resource tools, as you can see on screen, if you want to take note of that. The slides are available to you as well if you want to reach out to your coordinator in your region. The slides can be available as a resource to you as well. So I think that was a wonderful evening. I want to thank Annette Muise and Angeline D'Entremont.
Very good.
Wow, I did well with that, didn't I?
You did.
And thank you to all of you. I don't know where you are across the province, across the country. It's a gorgeous evening here. So for you to take your time to be with us and to learn and to grow together, there's nothing better than that. So thank you, everybody. And we wish you all the best and have a great evening.